Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on the role of event intelligence in monitoring and observability tool rationalization. We have a packed-filled agenda full of frameworks, models, benchmarking data, and insights that are going to help you accelerate and think about how you can rationalize your monitoring tool stack while ensuring you have the visibility and coverage that you need in order to maintain service reliability. I'm Adam Blau, VP of Product Marketing, and joining me is Josh Sigler, who is our Principal Architect of Analytics. And during this presentation, please feel free in the upper right-hand corner, you have a chat box where you can ask us questions. We will do our best to answer them live, but if we can't, we will follow up with you. And this webinar will be made on demand, so you can share it with all of your colleagues and all the people in your network to share these amazing insights that we're going to be delivering today. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So I kind of want to set the stage for you all in terms of thinking, why is it that most enterprises that we're speaking to want to tackle monitoring tool rationalization? It comes up in almost every conversation that we have. And a lot of customers are trying to figure out how they can rethink how they're deploying and supporting monitoring and observability. Well, we know that with hybrid infrastructures and cloud-native architectures and modern CI/CD systems, there's just an explosion of telemetry coming out. And there's best-of-breed tools, purpose-built tools, tools that do or claim they do everything. And it's really impacted customers' budgets. So Gartner, in their what I thought was an amazing report they wrote, Get Your Observability Spend Under Control, they wrote that customers are experiencing a 20% year-over-year rise in observability costs with the average median spend of 800,000 K. So a lot of our customers have 20, 30, 40, 50, some have 80 tools. Well, you can do the math. This is a large part of spend. And we also know that because of, the hybrid infrastructure and different like self-contained business units and teams managing critical applications and services, they might want to have their own special observability tool, or they have their own kind of monitoring system that they want to work with. And if so, and our organizations are realizing that if they don't get a plan and a framework how to control that spend, they're going to be overspending by 50%. So if an organization is spending $40, $50 million or $60 million on this, or even more, that overspend will really impact IT budgets. And we're seeing is that median spend with a single vendor is also going up. So what's going on here? Like, why is this so challenging for customers? And if we go to the next slide, Josh, I kind of want to talk about why customers might have a 3-year process, or why they are really why this has been so difficult to bring down the number of tools. Well, a lot of monitoring observability tools, were designed for a specific purpose, and they expanded features and capabilities that allow them to have foray into other areas like digital experience monitoring, cloud, security, infrastructure, network, database, you name it. But when those tools overlap, do you have visibility into that? And can you really showcase the value of what you're observing beyond the perspective of what a developer needs? A big challenge that our customers face is that when they're looking at observability tool rationalization from the perspective of observability tools and the people who use them, it's a very kind of subjective opinion on the value of those tools. Well, I like it. It provides the best-in-class APM. Well, how can you prove what the value of that is to IT operations, or your incident management process, or your change management process, to every team or system or tool that's working outside of that self-contained application? How can you showcase the value it provides in proactive detection or actionability? So when someone who has to respond to an alert that didn't design it in the first place, that they can actually take action. And that becomes very hard inertia to overcome. It becomes very hard to have a data-driven conversation when you don't have those insights into actually showcasing the value. And there's also really hard because if you don't have a single point of view of what these tools are doing, you can't actually reduce the noise or have a visibility of getting all these monitoring tools in a single place to actually observe and then rationalize and improve and optimize. So when you don't have these systems of framework, it becomes very difficult. So if we go to the next slide, that difficulty is in real, tangible business pain. The ironic part that we see happening within enterprises is they're spending 20% year over year on observability, and their ITSM costs are going up year over year. Yet 65% of tickets come from end users, not from observability. Isn't that ironic? The intuition is I need more visibility. I need more monitoring. I need more comprehensive analytics on all these applications and services. That actually makes it the problem worse. And that is exacerbated by the fact that in research that we've done, all the alerts that we see, the billions and billions of alerts we see every year from all of our enterprise customers, only 18% of them are actually actionable. And Josh has a whole talk to what makes an alert actionable? Why is this concept so important? And why is noise so detrimental to actually detection? And because you can't detect what's happening, because you don't have the information you need to take a decision what happens, your response process is very challenging. So customers of ours have large in-house and outsourced L1 operations. And some data from Gartner shows customers are spending $200 billion on these human-led manual IT workflows to detect and respond to alerts as they come up before they become incidents. But most of the time, organizations are just reacting to what customers are telling them, leading to eroded customer trust, high costs, and delayed response. So we want to help our customers kind of think about a framework. If we go to the next slide, this is what Gartner in their report, Take Control of Your Observability Tool Sprawl, stipulates what you need to do in order to get ahead of it. And I really like this framework, and it kind of talks about getting inventory of the different tools, get different people on board in board of this process. But if you click forward, you'll see the really hard part is this part. How do you assess the tool fitness? How do you propose in a data-driven approach the candidates that can be optimized, that can be reduced, where you can reduce the consumption of those tools or even get rid of them in the first place? Easier said than done. And that is the purpose of today's webinar. If we go to the next slide, we want to talk a little bit today around a framework that we've put together that helps articulate what are all your tools really doing? What is the value that they're driving? What are the things you should be measuring? What are the characteristics that are important? There is no insights that we've been able to see of what are the 6 dimensions to monitoring quality when you're looking at IT operations and incident management. Well, Josh has put that together. So today's presentation, he's going to go through with you and kind of illustrate the framework we've built that we're using with customers and why this insight is so critical to be thinking about how you leverage this when looking at your own observability tool stack and understanding how to formulate a plan to move forward. And with that, Josh, I'll hand it over to you.
Adam. Now, in a lot of the different conversations that I've been part of with customers who want to do tool rationalization, there tends to be 2 different trains of thought. One of them is more around the intuition. And Adam kind of mentioned this in his slides before, where it says, hey, in absence of data, how do you approach tool rationalization? You go with your gut, you talk to people, see how long a tool has been around for, and you try to arrive at the right decision on kind of what actions you should take. The other thing, I just, and being someone that is a sports fan, I saw just tons of parallels for how we saw how data changed the data landscape. And we really think that we can use data to change the tool rationalization landscape as well. Now, I want to show a couple different examples here that I've noticed as my time being a sports fan. If you go back to the 1990s, you remember the big home run race, the Mark McGwire, the Sammy Sosa, steroid age of baseball. You see this picture. This is Mark McGwire here. big burly guy, flexing. He's in the Got Milk advertisement. He's all about hitting home runs. You go into the 2000s and it's about Moneyball. It's actually a bunch of stat geeks that are in a room and saying, hey, it's not about how big my players are. It's not about hitting home runs. It's about singles. It's about getting on base. We've seen baseball actually shift more towards that Moneyball type landscape. I can look at the NFL, and there's this term called bell cow running backs. Now, I knew exactly what this term was, and as I was prepping for this, I realized I don't even know what bell cow means. Bell cow is when you have a herd of cattle, you put the lead cattle, you put a bell on them so everyone would follow them. In football, that meant, hey, to be successful, you needed a big time running back. You see there the Emmitt Smith, the Marshall Faulks, the Barry Sanders, the very famous ones of the 90s. If we look at running backs today, I found this chart interesting. When you look at the salaries of players in the NFL, across the board, we pretty much see every number going up and to the right. We see a greater pool of money available for players. But there's one position in blue you see there that goes down. That's running backs. And so we've seen that as more data analysis has gone into the NFL and the team construction, they've actually devaluated in some sense, the importance of the running back position. The final example here comes in terms of the NBA. If you look at the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, everything was about, hey, you need a dominant big man. Here's Shaq. He's 7 feet tall, huge guy. Throw it to him in the low post. It's all about slam dunks, post play. If you look at basketball today, it's Steph Curry. It's this little 6 foot guard who's in the perimeter, who's shooting threes, completely revolutionized the game because the data and the numbers told us the 3-pointers are more valuable than 2-pointers. Now, if I take these two different parallels that we just saw with sports, you can actually apply them into ITOps and you can apply it to tool rationalization. When you go with that intuition-based approach, it's really about, again, asking your team. My team is telling me that tool B is really easy to use, and so it must be providing a lot of value. We've had tool A for a while. Maybe you're new to the organization. Hey, if it's not broke, don't touch it. And unfortunately, what also happens is what you see at the bottom there, which is, well, hey, I bought this vendor in, or maybe I'm signing the checks that's for them, or I like this organization, I like their roadmaps. That must be a good tool. But when we look at it from the data powered side of the analytics, it's a completely different set of questions or a different set of criteria. You're really asking about, well, how actionable are the incidents that are coming from my tools? Which tools are actually driving those high priority tickets so that I'm actually detecting issues before they become majors? What's my ROI? What's the business impact? How good is my noise reduction? How good is my context awareness? So you can really kind of see how on one hand, you have more intuition-based approach has one set of questions. The data is actually asking a completely different set of criteria. Now, this isn't to say that this concept is one or the other. It's not, hey, get in your lane and pick one. What we really see is the sweet spot is what sits directly in the middle. No one is going to take a report and basically say, okay, the data based upon these factors are at the bottom, so I'm going to instantly get rid of those tools. No, the data is an input that goes into making your decision. Likewise, your criteria, your feedback from your teams, your intuition around what's working and what isn't, those combined into different inputs that allow you to arrive at the best outcome when it comes to seeing what tools are actually adding value. And you can see on the left-hand side, it's really about the convergence of them. Again, if my team is telling me that this tool is working, but the data isn't telling me that it's there, now I have a gap. Now maybe I have some kind of bias that exists that I need to dive into. What you really kind of hope for is to say, hey, my team is telling me this tool is working. The data is telling me this tool is working. Now I'm confident that, hey, that tool is at the top of the stack. If both those things are the opposite, the data is telling me, underwhelming performance, my team is telling me the tool's not doing well. Well, hey, I've just validated that outcome. And some of the other questions on here we're going to dive into in a little bit, but I think framework on the data side is a really important topic as well. You might say, hey, this tool is good, or as Adam mentioned before, hey, I have this APM system, it's doing really well. Well, what does well even mean? Now, a couple different suggestions on kind of how to get started with tool rationalization and kind of the hybridization of the two approaches. The first one is more of the committee-based approach, or what really makes sense here is to say, hey, we need to look at, across the enterprise. We need to grab folks from incident management. We need to grab folks from ITOps. We need to grab folks from observability. We need to get them in a room and we need to say, hey, you need to start making these decisions. They need to establish that criteria. They need to start pulling data into this. Now we go into that framework when I was talking about, which is we need to actually say, well, what does good look like? What defines good? What are the different categories? What are the metrics? What are the outcomes that we're looking to achieve? And again, that really fits into that right side of the equation on the analytics. Gather the insights in order to drive them as inputs into your decision-making process. And the final piece over here on the right-hand side is establishing your baselines. Now that you have the data, how can you begin to stack rank your different tools to understand what's at the top, what's at the bottom? You can really then begin to focus on, well, what are the KPIs that are actually going to make a difference for your business? Whether that is things around actionability, that could be around looking at overlapping coverage. Where do I have two tools that are monitoring the same CI that's adding redundancy? And you also want to look at the industry standards or the industry benchmark. Are we using this tool the right way compared to how our peers are getting value from it? Or do we holistically have a gap that exists across all of observability as opposed to just one particular place? You really need the data and you need you and your team's intuition to get the best possible outcomes here.
Hey, Josh, I have a question on that, including IT ops and incident management in that committee approach. That might be kind of a new idea that may not seem very intuitive when customers are thinking about this. When you share this with some of the customers you work with, what's their response or how do they kind of react to that?
One of the funny things is that when BigPanda comes into a lot of our customers, and maybe we speak with more of the ITOps team, and we say, hey, we need to speak with the observability team because we're going to be ingesting their data. And we try to get them in the room. And then we go and we say, hey, downstream, we're going to bring in incident management because we need to connect to the ITSM system, and they're the consumers of the data that comes out of ITOps. And when those two fields, observability and incident management, come in the room with us, very often it's the first time that they have met or they have spoken with each other in person. Maybe they've been on emails before, but it's crazy to me because you have the outputs from one side directly impact the outputs from the other. And so if you're going to have, both dependencies here, everyone relies upon the data that comes from observability. So you can't just go ask one team, what tools are working. You got to go ask the other teams and say, hey, you consume this information as well. Are you able to achieve your business objectives? Do you have OKRs around these things? What do you see that's working, that's not working? Because at the end of the day, we're rationalizing for the enterprise. We're not rationalizing just for observability. We're not rationalizing just for incident management. We're trying to say, hey, we need the right tools that bring all of us the most value. So that to me is just it's a subtle thing around just, hey, getting the right people in the room. But again, it's just always surprising when we hear, hey, these teams have never corresponded before.
Yeah. Yeah, really. Yeah, great insight. I think it provides a conversation that they can have around, hey, we had a customer complain about something. We didn't get any alerts on it. Like, it also provides a new way of having a conversation of what's actually being monitored and what's not.
Right, because then when someone on incident management says that, the first thing the observability person is going to say, well, hey, did I have monitoring on it? And if not, thank you for identifying that gap for me,
Yeah.
so that now I can go ahead and say, oh, maybe we missed this, maybe it's new, for whatever reason, observability wasn't there. Like, they want to detect everything before it happens. So that kind of like open dialogue, open communication is really important.
Great. Thanks.
Now, I kind of mentioned this data-driven framework before. Again, really, what's the definition of what does good observability look like? And we've come up with what I'll call the categories, 6 different categories or 6 different ways to look at identifying what are your good observability tools. And these kind of range from both kind of, again, different aspects of observability, data efficiency, monitoring coverage. Those really begin to look at, how much data is it coming? What percent of the enterprise data or monitoring volume is coming from each of my tools? How widely deployed is this tools? How many CIs do I have under management? How many different types of checks or health checks am I doing with this tool? We look at noise reduction. We look at actionability. These tend to be a bit more of BigPanda metrics in terms of how good is my correlation? How good is my deduplication? How good am I at invoking incident response when I have incidents coming through? I'll circle back a little bit on actionability. Context awareness as well. How good are we How good are we at enriching alerts as it come through? What's the alert quality? How good is this the signal that's coming in? And then finally, incident handling in terms of your MTTR, what does the response look like? So this is typically our view of the world in terms of looking across the entire spectrum from observability to ITOps, incident management, just what does good observability look like? Now, the way that we actually begin to use that framework is by actually using this to establish baselines. And one of the key products that we've started rolling out is what we're beginning to call our observability scorecard. And this is our way to take a data-based approach towards actually grading out how well do each of those tools perform across each of those 6 categories. Now, I kind of flashed them very briefly on the previous slide, but if you look at that very top banner up there, data efficiency, monitoring coverage, context awareness, incident handling, we actually come up with a score on a range from 1 to 5 that says, hey, how well is each of your observability tools performing there? And what this does is that framework allows us to come back and say, hey, overall, how is this tool doing? And that tends to be a little bit more of kind of like the higher level executive type view, like, hey, I don't need to know the details, boil this down to a single number for me. But what it really does, it allows us to build, again, that stack rank. What tools are at the very top? What's performing well? And also what's at the bottom? What's underperforming? What's not giving me value? Potentially, what are my top candidates to say, hey, why do we have this tool? Why am I pulling budget in order to support this tool if it's not providing any value to us? And one of the other nice things about this view that I really like from a heat map perspective is it allows you to see where tools are doing well and where tools need improvement.
So Josh, you did that report across 80 different tools.
Yeah, we ran this across 80 different tools at an organization. So a little bit higher than an average 20 tools per customer that you said before.
Wow, interesting. So you really gives them a high level and like detailed perspective of what's really happening across their entire stack. Hmm.
Yeah, and again, we get a lot of good feedback just around the heat map perspective. A lot more visual folks. Because again, who doesn't want to see a lot of green on here is usually the best, but that red usually drives a lot more conversation.
I'll just mention for the viewers in this webinar, we've hidden some of the names or the names of the individual tools. Like in your report, you would have detailed information, but because it's public information, we just want to make sure we're just hiding sensitive context here.
Now, the output of this scorecard isn't just the heat map. I think what's also important is we begin to actually provide analysis on the data. So again, you had to imagine you had 80 tools like this particular example there. Think about how much data you're looking at once and trying to say, what are the trends? What should I be taking away from this information? And so we publish on, in addition to that PDF, 2 different types of deep dives. One is we look at what are some of the key categories that were used in the report. And in this case, we're looking at actionability. How do we make our incidents more actionable? With the actual outcome here being, hey, how can we start to reduce some consumption costs for things that just aren't actionable to the organization? We look at the monitoring coverage. So we're looking at, hey, how many CIs are being monitored? How widely deployed is this tool? What's the footprint that it exists? Do I have one tool that's doing 90% of my monitoring coverage, and then I have a bunch that are doing 10? Or, hey, do I have opportunities where I am monitoring something, I'm not monitoring something, I have 5 tools monitoring the same thing? That's not really adding a lot of value or overspend there. And the final piece there, again, that data efficiency, how good are tools at actually converting from events to incidents? How many events does it take to create in the incident management ticket? How much do I have to spend per a tool based upon how many tickets that are coming out? And again, the outcome of this is, again, we spend less time actually just staring at a heat map and trying to say what it is. This is actually surfacing for us the key conclusions. Now, the third slide on here, the third piece of the puzzle here, again, starts to speak to actions or decision making. And what we try to do is we try to take all those tools you saw and basically put them into one of three buckets. There's a tier one, there's a scale. This tool is adding a lot of value. So you see places you could be doing more work with it, more monitoring. We look at tier two, sits in the middle, moderate value, but we need to optimize. And again, we can go back to that heat map view and just look specifically, hey, which of those categories is this tool not doing well? And if I start to put resources, can I actually derive more value from that? Not just about where it sits today, but how can I drive improvement? And then the third piece at the bottom, the tier three, what's not adding value? What should I really be considering rationalizing from my stack? And that's where we can actually start to look at some green dollars, some ROI savings from being able to do true rationalization. Now, for those folks who maybe what I just showed on the screen there from a scorecard, a little bit too much. I don't need a 3-page PDF. I just need a one slide, or just help me get started. Help put the pieces in the corner for me. What we also do here is our observability matrix. And this particular example is actually looking across our entire customer base, not just a single tool. We're doing it by vendor, but by actually comparing our coverage on the x-axis, percentage of action incidents, over to the quality or the actionability on the y-axis. It's kind of 2x2 plot becomes a very easy way, again, on just a one slide executive type view, to put all your tools, or in this case, all your vendors into a view and saying, well, how many tools are on my top right? What's getting the most value from it? What is the moderate value on the top left and the bottom right there? And then finally, towards the 0, the bottom left, kind of the worst candidate to be what's not adding value. We've actually invested a lot of time, effort, data analysis to kind of come up with, hey, scoring frameworks, heat maps, analysis outcomes, but then also a very simple, easy to consume, hey, give me the matrix of my tools. Now, I've been talking about this concept of actionability, and someone really, really smart came up with this quote. They said, hey, one of the things that BigPanda does, actionability percentage, it's the unsung hero. It's one of the keys to actually understanding what value am I getting from these tools. And I wanted to kind of just actually use this as an opportunity to walk through, again, another example. We saw before the impact that analytics had on sports, what it can do for tools rationalization. I want to draw a similar type of analysis, and I want to go old school. I want to go snail mail. Now, I want to go phase one of this approach is you go to your mailbox. You got 100 letters that are stuffed in there. You finally decide, hey, today's the day I'm going to read the mail. And before you do anything, there's a couple of different factions you look at. You're trying to see, hey, what's an invitation that I need? What are some good coupons? Maybe I got holiday cards. Maybe you don't want to read the holiday cards, but you're kind of using some context clues in order to say, hey, what letters should I open versus what should I throw out? And we're starting at 100. Now you make that determination, and let's use some examples here. Let's say, hey, you decide to read 40 of those letters. So you went from having a pile of 100 to only deciding to read 40 of them. 60 of them, they look like bills. Everyone kind of knows that thin paper feely kind of thing. You said, hey, I'm just going to throw them out. I'm not even going to open them to begin with. Now, after that, after you read your 40 letters, you probably say, hey, some of those were good. I got those buy one, get one coupons, or I got an invitation to this party that I was really looking forward to. 20 of them that you opened, you said, hey, that was worth my time. I needed to open them. There were still another 20 that you opened up. And again, they were bills, they were spam. You basically took one look at it and you said, oh, I should have never opened this to begin with. And you threw it in the trash. So we started at a level of 100 letters at the top that you had opening your mail. You read 40, 20 of them were relevant, 20 went into the trash. Now, if we start to actually look at some conversion metrics on here, you could begin to have some KPIs. You could say, well, hey, I had a 40% read ratio of my mail. I had a 50% relevancy because of the 40 that I opened, 20 of them I found important. And overall, that gave me a 20% success rate. Of the 100 letters I got, 20 of them were successful, 20%. Now, I'm not going to change any single number on here, but I am going to change the pictures. Because what this actually does is this tells the story of ITOps, especially your knock, your incident response. Now, instead of getting 100 letters, you had 100 incidents come through. Let's say 40 of those created an ITSM ticket. That's your 40% BigPanda actionability ratio. And then of those 40, when the team closed them out, you can begin to look at the closure codes there in order to say, hey, what actually required my time? What was a bug fix? What did I actually need to apply a solution for to get service restoration? Versus what wasn't solved? What was solved without action? Who spent the end of the month going bulk resolve on a bunch of tickets that have been open too long and saying, oh, close those out. I doubled my quota for the day of tickets I need to handle. Those are your kind of unnecessary tickets compared to the ones that were relevant. I think I also kind of missed the one on the right-hand side, the auto-resolve self-healed. So it does kind of break out between, hey, I had 40, invoked an auto share, they opened the ticket, 60 just sat in the BigPanda console. No one really did anything with them. They self-healed or they auto-resolve at the very end. Now, this is where the actionability comes into play. We had a BigPanda 40%, ITSM 50 actionability, ITSM 50% actionability, but we also had that 20% total actionability. But we're talking about ITOps here. So it's not just 100. After you got through that first 100, the mailman came by for the third, fourth, fifth time today and said, yep, here's a bunch of more letters now you have to read. So when you get to think about that cycle, that constant happening there, and on one hand, in the vacuum, 100 letters or 100 incidents might not be that bad. But you begin to scale it up to, well, that's 1,000 incidents, that's 10,000 incidents over a month, over a year. That scale really starts to get big. And that's when actionability really starts to play a factor. Now, I kind of mentioned, the conversion percentages of success. But I actually want to look at the inverse on these two, because I think that's important. That's where we actually use actionability to drive action and drive improvement. So the first thing on the top right there in the red, the non-action incidents. What is hitting the BigPanda console and no one is ever looking at and closes out? It's kind of the old saying, if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it even really fall? It's the same thing here with BigPanda and ITOps. If those 60 incidents never even went to BigPanda, would anyone even notice? And the next question is, if no one notices, why did you send them in the first place? You think about, from a cost perspective, if I could just take all those things that no one is looking at, stop generating them in BigPanda, stop generating them for my monitoring tools. We'll show some slides there about what the impact of that is over time. But it's a very quick way to basically say, I'm going to help address my noise problem by not sending things that are not actionable. The second piece of the puzzle is at the bottom there, ITSM tickets in green. What am I open tickets for that people instantly look at and say, why did you send that to me? Or why did you need to open that? This is a little bit of the boy who cried wolf a lot of times as well. Because if I'm constantly spamming you with incidents saying, impacted router, the network is down, the network is down, the network is down. And every time you go into there, you're like, the network's back up. I have nothing to do. That's where alert fatigue comes in. I am so tired of looking at the same alert over and over and over again that's not actionable. That may be the one time where you actually need to look at it. In your mind, you've already told yourself, I'm not going to pay any attention to that. So also looking at the tickets that are being opened that the team is giving you feedback on through closure codes or through other methods to say, hey, this wasn't actionable for me. That to me is also candidate to say, well, why are we opening tickets for things that people are looking at and saying, this isn't helpful. I have no action to take from them. Now, to kind of draw that example before, an overall 20% actionability rate, when we did our analysis on there, we saw that the median BigPanda actionability for our customers is 18%. So what that means is that every 100 incidents that our customers send us that pass through the BigPanda console, only 18 of them are leading to an action incident. That's pretty low. Our kind of view on that is like, hey, there's a lot of meat on that bone, or to say, hey, there's an opportunity to reduce my alert noise, reduce my alert volumes by 82%. That's a big opportunity to make a measurable difference in IT. You can really see kind of some of the other stats there that really support that up. It's not if you look at the middle there, it's not the case where it's just one or two customers that had this number. 51% of our BigPanda customers were under 20%. So again, this is kind of a widespread problem when you look at actionability that we think is the key towards seeing better outcomes. It's a key towards reducing your costs, and it's a key input that goes into that observability framework. Now, the next question is the why now? Why should I be walking away from this presentation and asking all my peers, hey, do we know what our actionability rate is in BigPanda? You look at kind of the scale and the growth of IT over time, more and more and more observability coming in. You look at where we are today, 2025, without doing the number crunching, we're probably at like 50% noise alerts, 50% actionable alerts. That number just keeps growing and growing and growing over time. Like, oh, we'll do the rationalization next year. We'll look at our CMDB in a little bit and make that better. Oh, we'll cut down on our noise. We'll focus on our actionability. Well, just think of if you had an opportunity back in 2020, in 2019, 10 years ago in 2015 to get this problem under control. Imagine if that light blue didn't exist. If you only had that dark blue because you focused on actionability and you said, hey, I'm only going to keep the alerts that are opening tickets to my teams that they need to get. How much better would your knock be? How much better would your incident management be? How much better would your quality of life be? How many other projects that you said, oh, I couldn't take this on because I'm drowning in noise? How much other automation could you have worked on and added into your stack? So kind of the longer this problem sits and sits and sits, more legacy, more, hey, don't touch this because 30 years ago it was relevant. The time to do it is now because you see the benefits in 1, 2, 3, forever on. And the longer it takes, the harder it is to do.
Hey, Josh, in your discussions with customers, have you ever met somebody who has the title Alert Quality Manager?
No, they never have. And usually every time I bring that up, they say, why don't we have that role? But no, it doesn't exist in organizations. It's not anyone's job to say, hey, how good are the alerts coming through?
Right. Do you think like a lot of these legacy alerts were set by somebody a couple of years ago? That person is no longer there or somewhere else, and nobody knows why that alert was set up, and nobody knows if it's important, but they're all afraid to turn it off because they don't know what the downstream impacts are.
Very, very much so. There's ton of just, again, if it's not doing any harm, why touch it? I've had one customer, they're still sending us mainframe alerts from the 1980s. The person who set it up has been retired, and their kids are now coming into the AI ops space, if you want to think about kind of how long that horizon is. But part of the fallacy there is you say, hey, it's not doing any harm. Problem is that it is doing harm. The problem is that one alert is not doing harm. We begin to scale it. If you took all of your legacy use cases across an entire, Fortune 50, Fortune 500 enterprise, that's how you get to this slide here where you are in 25, 26, and 27. Because you keep telling yourself there's no harm in keeping it around. What you really should be telling yourself is, what's the cost of not taking action now?
I mean, you could also could assume that delta between light and dark blue is the humans that you need to look at all this stuff. Like, how big is your team to support all that noise? Because it has to be looked
Right.
at or not, but like there needs to be some sort of human-led process.
Probably a one-man process for this back in the 2010s. As you said, it's now a five team process to do in 2025.
Now, it's not
And you think about
outsourced teams. Yeah, interesting.
be really nice. be really nice if you had a data-driven framework to do that, wouldn't it?
Sure would be. Well, I'm glad we can offer one now. Cool.
So just really to wrap this up on actionability, how do you get started? Very first thing is your definition of noise. You're probably all on the call today because you're saying, hey, I have a noise problem. But how do you turn that into numbers? How do you quantify it? How do you begin to tell people just how bad is my noise problem? And you can do that by actually digging into what is my actionability? How does that compare to benchmark standards? And also, what is driving the noise? Is it one, two, or three tools? Which of your teams, which of your applications or services? That really starts you to get the pinpoint. I start with I have a noise problem at my enterprise. But let's start to get narrower and really dive into, well, where's the biggest pain being felt? The second one is optimization. Once you know where the pain is, now you can really begin to start taking action. You need to surface up what are the patterns of my noisiest alerts. You can do some things in BigPanda. You can add filters. You can correlate better. You can deduplicate better. But what you can also do is partner with your observability teams and use data to drive their actions. I need you to turn off these sets of alerts because the last 100 times they've fired, they're not translating to alerts. And the final piece there, cost savings. Let's not spend money on things that aren't adding value or just adding more chaos into our daily lives. If we start not sending things that are not actionable, well, we should see a savings on consumption costs because we're going to be generating less data of things that isn't helping. As Adam pointed out too, from a legacy use case perspective, you can't be scared to say, I can't touch this because, it's been around forever. You really need to focus on, well, what are the goals we're looking to achieve today? How are we going to preserve service availability? Not, I need to keep all the lights on in the house because I'm too scared to turn them off. And the final piece there around log effectiveness as well. Log costs getting totally out of control. We have different webinars that kind of go into that context. But if we begin to think about logging and how that translates to actionable alerts and actionable incidents, you begin to now paint a picture of, well, just how valuable is my investment in all of this logging, all this log ingestion? Is it actually making tickets downstream for me better, or is it just contributing to my noise problem?
That was awesome, Josh. Thank you. There's a lot of great insights there. I think the framework that you shared was really thoughtful, and we've been using that with some of our customers now, and we're starting to operationalize it and getting some really great feedback and insights in how we can help customers go through this process of categorizing, benchmarking, and then driving long-term strategic planning within their observability stack. If you found this webinar helpful and want to dive in more, there's a couple different ways you can do that. So we have that benchmarking report that we talked about where we have, gosh, I think it's like 50, 60 pages of benchmarking data. So if you want to take a look at that, it's called the Monitoring and Observability Tool Effectiveness for IT Management, where we have a lot of data points across all BigPanda customers over the past, I think it was a year or two. So it really gives you an idea of what kind of metrics you can look at. We also have that Gartner report, Get Your Observability Spend Under Control. BigPanda sponsored that report, so that's available to you as well. So it's a follow-up action if you want to learn more, if you want to get the Gartner perspective of how to approach this. And if you want to speak to Josh or speak to somebody about this process, please reach out. You can request a demo, speak to an account executive, and we'll kind of walk you through this process and kind of show you what it looks like. So if you're a customer or not, we're happy to have that conversation and show how this can be part of your workflow.
And just to add on to that, Adam, I'll say that a little more subtly from my perspective. You want to see what your data looks like on that same heat map. What's red, what's green, what's yellow, what's at the top, what's at the bottom. We're doing this for all of our customers that are coming to us and kind of interested in tool rationalization. So kind of a, pain-free, no harm, no foul. You got nothing to lose by saying, yeah, what does my data look like? Really speak to your account exec to set that up.
Yeah, great. Thanks for being not subtle and direct, Josh. I appreciate that. That's awesome. Okay, so good. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day. We try to get through some of the questions you asked in this, some of the things that I asked Josh, but we probably didn't get to everything. So we're going to follow up with you and make sure you get all the answers that you want. And if you were thinking about this webinar later on your drive home or in the morning shower, feel free to reach out at any time. So thanks very much and have a great rest of your day.